Well, I just appreciate you guys being like not only on time but early, right? Someone once always taught me there's no such thing as being on time. You're either early or you're late. So that's what I learned. All right, let me get my. I'm going to turn on my do not disturb. Okay, let's get this party started, shall we, gentlemen? I'm going to first of all say welcome to this week's weekly briefing. I'm Joel. I am not joined by my colleague Tim. Instead, I am joined by two much more illustrious friends, colleagues, peers. The gentleman from Trick and Mortar, Footy and Dave. Footy, say hello, and can you tell us just in a sentence or two what Trick and Mortar does, and then pass it off to Dave, and he can say something clever or amusing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Footy and Dave represent Trick and Mortar. Trick and Mortar, a creative studio that tricks all the right boxes, is our tagline. And we work on a lot of promos and commercials and trailers. I kind of represent the Trick, and Dave represents the Mortar. I'm the one that tries to get you into the job, and Dave's the one who gets it done. And that's kind of how we roll. Dave, you agree?
Yeah, I think I usually get it done. I think that's my goal.
Isn't that's what we're talking about today?
That's kind of the point of today. Yeah. Figure out how to get it done and when to start figuring out how to get it done.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys being here. You're both active in the community, and you're both the type of people that share your perspective and your opinions, not just with the client side of the world, but also with your colleagues and your peers, and let's be honest, even with competitors. So I just very much appreciate that generosity and being willing here to subject yourself to this conversation and reveal some insights and some secrets and so forth. By the way, I see Tim here joining us. So Tim, I'm going to lead the conversation, but you're here and available if we want to lean on you, right?
Love it.
Okay, awesome. Good to have you here. Well, look, just by way of reminder, if you're here and watching the weekly briefing for the first time, or you're watching the replay, it's really our time at RevThink and our community of creative firm owners when we get together and we just talk about either a current hot button issue, something we're seeing, maybe it's a recent trend or something. And this one fits into that category because Footy, you reached out to me, I don't know, a few weeks or a month ago, and we started this conversation about what I would just kind of call this classic ever creeping towards increasing complexity when it comes to the way projects are getting done and the scope of projects and the deliverables on projects and all this kind of stuff. And you had a different take on it. You felt like, gosh, I feel like in our industry, whether you're delivering for broadcast or for commercial or just brand content for a brand, that we've gone from a day where when I was running my studio, and Dave, you referenced these days as well, there was a day where we would publish a 30-second spot onto a piece of videotape and we would overnight it FedEx. That was delivery.
Yeah.
We're done, send the invoice, that was it. So I'm curious, Footy, from your perspective, how much has that world changed? If you were to give us like the worst case scenario, what is it like now and what are those challenges?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I think Dave and I probably speak more out of experience than as experts. I think we always have that imposter syndrome of calling ourselves experts. So we look at it as experience. And for us, the experiences we both started kind of side by side at Discovery Channel in the QC department. That was our first job, to watch hours and hours on end of trading spaces and
Baby
Deadliest
Store.
Catch and Mythbusters and all that. Yeah. And basically evaluate the television, the shows for errors, mistakes, all that kind of stuff. So we have a complete wealth of useless knowledge from early 2000s of Discovery Channel. That's one plus. Something that came out of that was our learned understanding of tech specs, basically. What it takes to deliver something to a network, broadcast, what have you. And I think over the years, what we've noticed is this long churn of more and more stuff needed to be put out into the world. That's just the march of time, I think, regular, but the mentality or the thinking of it has kind of remained back in the day when you used to sit and watch tape. You'd be putting stuff to tape and you'd watch every single version of the spot that you did being put onto a digibeta or an HD cam or what have you. And you'd be able to check for things. And there was only so many specs that you had to meet, because once it was on tape, there was either video there or there wasn't, and you sent it off.
Right.
And now you get platforms, deliverables for each platform, versions for each deliverable of each platform, print, event space things, apps, plus entertainment, plus streaming. There's a lot going on, but the mentality is, oh, we'll get it all done on Friday at 5 o'clock when the approval comes in. And now you find yourself scrambling to get all that stuff done. That's the hard part, is that mentality of it hasn't really changed.
Well, and let me ask you this, Dave. I'm curious, from the client's perspective, I'm guessing these are just like, well, you're going to have to deal with it, right? There's this command from on high called, here are our delivery specs, whether it's coming from the network or from the internal agency at the brand or what have you. And these specs probably just get longer and longer and longer as the years go by. Are we talking like an order of magnitude, meaning instead of one deliverable, we now have 10, or is it more like we have 100? What does this look like from your perspective?
It is, I mean, it's a huge order of magnitude. We, last couple of things we've done, we clock in over 100 deliverables. And that's,
Wow.
Some things are repetitive, but some things are just reversioned into different file formats or wrappers or progressive or interlaced or, different delivery stations. And it's kind of interesting over time. We were so thrilled when, digital delivery, we were partnered up with some of our clients to figure out digital delivery, because we're like, this is going to be the future. And now we're like, whoa, future, chill out. Like let's
Totally.
pump the brakes a little
Joel,
bit.
you used to put that tape in FedEx. We used to drive over to the clients and drop it off.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Right, Fridays at 6 o'clock, and Dave and I were like drawing straws for who was going to get to go home early that day or who had to drive the tape over.
And I think, our clients specifically are pretty great. They're well aware of this ever expanding, nature of the business. And a lot of them are just kind of thrown into this because of the nature of the industry right now. Everybody's joining together with different companies, and everybody's merging one company's thing with another company's thing. And it just makes it for a little bit more chaotic right now. Luckily we have great clients, and we can call them up and talk to people and get them on the phone, as opposed to just getting like, the back end of a get it out the door now kind of thing. So, but yeah, it's definitely an order of magnitude from what it was even 5-6 years ago.
Right.
So this isn't like scope creep, right? It's not like you start a project from the beginning and don't know these deliverables. When you're working with the client up front and they're giving you these deliverables, are you engaging them to pay for it? Is there some sort of understanding that this does cost more? Figure you're shaking your head. So
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the elements is, yes, the conversation is scope creep. But at the same time, there's this kind of element of like, can we get all the people involved at the beginning of the process, or at least mention getting those people involved? Because not every time does the marketing department say, yeah, we can get social in on this call or PR in this call. But we at least want to present like, hey guys, look, delivery now is X amount of deliverables. Let's say you have your regular spots, and then you have social and PR and print and whatever else. There's a point at which the teams, we've noticed, aren't really communicating with each other. So you might get halfway through a project and social gets introduced. And now all of a sudden you're doing some social things, even though you might have presented it early on. And the goal of all this, Tim, is to create the warm fuzzy feeling at the very end. You want to be able to click submit And the client is like, oh, so this is amazing. We should use these guys again. But what happens is no matter how awesome the creative is, right before you hit submit, if you misspelled something, or if there's a, blue was supposed to be red, clicking that submit button essentially kills all of that warm fuzziness because somebody will find that mistake in deliverable 271 out of 300, which by the way is still 99% correct. But somebody will find that mistake, and then what Dave and I cringe at is you get an email that has 75 names on it that says there is an error.
Yeah.
Trick and Mortar has failed, and that's like, whew, that hurts.
Here's a question I have for either one of you. Is there an opportunity? Have you, let's say this, have you turned this problem into an opportunity? Meaning when clients come to you and they're looking for that guidance and leadership called, hey, help us solve this problem. I'm sure you're way ahead of them and you're saying, hey, what about social? What about PR? What about platforms and all that stuff? But there's also a conversation called, and by the way, this is where things often go totally off the rails. Because if your CMO sees this at the 11th hour and says, hey, I want to use the vertical version of the logo and not the horizontal, and that ripples across all 300 deliverables, here's how that's going to go, or here's what you need to know, or here's how we will handle it, right? Do you guys have those kinds of conversations with clients right up front?
Yeah, so our project manager, we've been discussing this kind of issue. Yes, there definitely are opportunities. And the biggest one is schedule. The biggest one is communicate that schedule, plan that schedule upfront, and build in time. And so when you look at a project that is, let's say it's $50,000 versus a $15,000 project, where there's going to be more deliverables on one versus the other, there's a sliding scale of how much more work you have to do, but there's also a minimum amount of work, regardless of the size of project, that you have to do. And so you should be building in a minimum amount of time into your schedule. And then I think you should be billing for that as its own thing to some degree, right? Create a deliverables billing aspect to your budget.
Meaning like the versioning and rippling out and permutations is almost a separate ask. That way, if that scope blows up or if they change their mind at the 11th hour, you're like, okay, let's handle this like a separate project.
It sounds like you're saying the way to move forward is actually to come back to where we originally started, because again, we'll say like the old days, you used to deliver a file and then there was a post process. Sometimes the client internally broke that up, divided it up, cut that into pieces. And then, if you were the one delivering, you almost wanted some sort of license agreement. If you're going to use my work and make 1 million pieces, we should get a piece of it. Now we're getting what we asked for. Okay, cool. Here's 1 million pieces delivered to us. But again, like the origination idea of you guys used to sit in a QC room, it's almost like going back to that process and saying, hey, after this moment, we'll call this moment of delivery, then there's another process, an after process, a post process, where we're going to cut it into all the pieces, and there would be a QC, and every one of those elements and that entire method is a deliverable with different approvals and different acceptance.
Yeah, Dave had this great quote a couple of days ago. The process is almost as big as the promo itself.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is the whole discussion right here. And Dave, the creative process Monday through Friday at 12 is getting that thing looking cool. And then at 12 o'clock, you're like twiddling your thumbs as to whether or not they're going to approve it. And then there's a whole different world you guys shift into on the post side.
Yeah. I mean,
and what's that like?
It's just it's a left brain, right brain thing. It's, even on the simple, simple process for delivery, it's, a couple hundred files and then some. You've got music cue sheets, you've got audio files, you've got splits, you've got After Effects products you're delivering now as a de facto thing. And in a funny way, like it's just kind of become, it's kind of the norm. And it's when we'll work with a new client who's like a startup network or something, and they're like, what is the submaster? And we're like, what? Like what? So it's an interesting kind of change, for sure. And it is something I think everybody's dealing with. And the bummer is a lot of times these clients and bigger networks, they kind of just don't know what it entails sometimes, because they're all thrown into their own madness of their, departments getting reduced in size and more on their plate and more on their plate. And they don't know that, the engineering department needs to take a look at all 130 files and look at them. And, so it is kind of like, it's a little bit of chaos at the end that we always try and wrangle beforehand, which, sometimes.
Dave,
yeah.
Is there a filter that you guys also apply that I would just call sometimes it's not good business to solve that piece of that problem? It's better suited or solved some other way. Is that ever part of the conversation?
You mean the delivery issues or the deliverables?
Yeah, like when is it good business for you guys to take all that on, as opposed to saying, hey, client, you take on this piece, we'll take on that piece, those kinds of things, because then they learn what it takes, or they understand.
I feel like a lot of them, because of the way internal delivery works now, a lot of them have started to take on this process, because I think we all would agree, like, it's not a best use case of your money to pay us our, not that we bill by the hour, but our rate to do this kind of work that you guys know and can do much quicker or have a dedicated staff to. So that is one of the things, whereas before we would version all Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, next week coming up, whatever, ourselves, a lot of our clients have chosen to do that in-house, and where we provide them the elements to do that. So and that's just a matter of, because they have to go to international, they have to go to their different networks in different countries, or their social team or whatever. So it is kind of a great back and forth with a lot of our clients, to where they realize it's not a best use case of our time and talents and their money.
And that depends on the size of the company, whether it's a media company that has their act together, or it's just a brand who's looking for outside creative.
Yeah.
And then, Joel, that conversation also extends to what we call intra-team dynamics, where you might not have great communication between marketing and social, or social and PR, or whatever it is. Or brand all of a sudden comes in at the end and says, no, our lower thirds look like this.
It's always strategy, always strategy.
So you have to play that off of, like, how at the end of the day do you create that warm fuzzy feeling that everybody feels like, hey, there were some challenges on this project, but these guys came in and they took care of it. And yes, scope expands and it creeps and all that kind of thing, but they had a plan for how that worked, or they addressed it, because that CEO or the CMO who at the last minute says, no, we need to use the vertical logo, he doesn't care how it gets done. Yeah. Right.
I almost feel like you guys want to like separate it out. Like there's got to be, if this is the way it's going to work in the future, even if it's still inside your business, there's a handoff from the creative and production team to the finishing team. Yeah. And so it's there's like we're handing it over to here, and here's your finishing lead, and here's the finishing process, and they know where you're going, and they might ask you additional questions, so that you don't lose that love that when you hit the creative perfectly, and let that kind of thud into what, as if it's your responsibility as a creative director to also make sure every file name is a proper. And there's something in the human mind that does that switch, doesn't there? Where when you hand that off, they get it like, oh, this is a different group of people for that finishing.
It's like we got to bring back the online editor,
Yeah, I was just going to say,
the online
AEs.
Yeah, they came back. They really transitioned to a younger junior person who just output stuff and didn't really know all these technical things. But now it's getting back full swing to where, like, you kind of got to know your name, like your file formats, your MXF wrappers, Lord help us when everything goes HDR, like it's a hot mess of stuff you have to know. And one little thing, one flag is wrong, that ruins pretty much everything. And, it's more of like a, experience and expertise thing as we move along into all these new formats. So
or if there's some young high-tech entrepreneur out there, this is the moment to start your business and basically take this little piece of everyone's contract and just do that part of it, right? There's an evolution that already take place as well. Yeah.
So Footy, here's a question I have for you, because my brain, I'm always thinking about sort of the positioning and selling side of this kind of thing, is there an opportunity where most people, I think, would look at this problem and say, well, the solution is be turnkey, right? One-stop shop, we handle it all. We get a bigger budget and we produce all these thousands of deliverables. We figure it out. And I wouldn't argue with that, but I was also heard you saying some things that made me think, maybe there's a positioning called, hey, we're brilliant at strategy and creative, right? Production and post. And we are experts at toolkitting, right? And maybe handing your team the toolkit so you can version to your heart's content, change the logo to horizontal, vertical, diagonal, like we don't, whatever, that's you. And now you're being positioned more as we're solving this problem, not being viewed as, oh, those guys are, a chop shop with a bunch of editors that can crank out all of our different versions of this versus that and so forth. I'm just curious, is that part of your thinking too, in terms of how you move forward to solve this problem?
Sure.
What's the real genius, the real expertise that you're bringing that commands your highest price and taps your highest and best use?
Yeah. I mean, that's you're catching me inside of that dilemma all the time. Or are you serving the customers of yesterday or the customers of tomorrow? So for us personally, the challenge has been we started as what I lovingly refer to as an old school post shop. And so we still have clients that think of us in that way, and that's okay. We still provide them with some level of service, but slowly tinkering as you're moving forward. What is it that I want my most talented people to be working on? Do I want them to be naming files and renaming subfolders to match the sequence? Not really. So is there an opportunity to hand that off and then say, not in a callous way, but like use us for the best creative, utilize us from an opportunity standpoint for you, the client, or you, the customer, so that you get the best creative out of us. And like, let's figure out a way to have somebody else deal with the rest. And that's really hard for me to say because like Dave and I, that's like our bread and butter. Our bread and butter was the get it done part, was the like, once it gets approved, like we go into our little zone and crank it out and,
right.
Boom. Is that as entertaining? No, but it's very important to, get somebody to be happy with the entire process.
I mean,
Well,
I think
what I heard you saying, oh, go ahead, Dave.
I was gonna say, like, some of my favorite things to do is to, put a phone call into that engineer that has, that I'm like, oh man, I saw you QCing my spots all day. Do you know you can do this, this, and this to make that go quicker? Or like you're using your delivery platform of, a little bit archaically, here's this feature that they have built into it that you may not know about. And, 9 times out of 10, they're in the same rat race that we're in, is just trying to get their thing done. And that's usually my favorite thing to do, is to step alongside our clients, to let them know, like, hey, there's, not in a like, I know better than you, but we're doing this for a bunch of different people and everybody does it differently. Here's a pretty cool way that we've seen that works awesome. This may save you guys hours of your life, where you can check our spelling even more.
Yeah.
You're basically talking about almost building a standard that you could roll out and even get clients to understand. You might be over delivering, they're overthinking it. Reality is you can make some new standards and see if you can't come into that advisor role, be the smarter one in the room and give them those standards. Great idea.
I think in an alternate world, Dave is the CEO of a QC company that sells software. No?
Have you seen my spelling? It's the worst.
No, I'm not saying that you have to QC. I'm saying you own the company.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other part of the QC thing, is like creating a process for you internally. So maybe you can't hand it off. Maybe you don't have the ability to have a junior editor or an assistant, or you have a team that's divided in that way. Maybe it's 3 or 4 people and you're just cranking along making great creative. You still have to have an internal process that includes more than just 2 eyeballs. right? It's got to be at least 4 eyeballs looking at that stuff. That might be the producer, it might be the producer and the editor, but it would be lovely if it was more than 2, actually, more than the 2 people that are in the edit suite together or in on making the thing together, because they're so close to the project. And so creating that internal process, if you have a smaller team, is super vital, and have something you can check against, right? In our case, we're checking against the spec sheet, but that's just one spec sheet of many spec sheets. So what's the process you go through as a company to make sure that every time it meets your own company's standard, not just the client standard?
That makes me wonder too, because as you were talking about that, Footy, I was just thinking, this is obviously the broadcast networks have been in this world of ever increasing complexities, and you're giving us good ideas on how do we not only manage all those complexities, but also the people, right? And I heard Dave saying, collaborate with those internal teams, right? They're not your enemy, they're your friend. And you're going to create a really strong relationship and let them focus on what they do best, so you can do what you do best. How does this start to apply to the non-network, non-broadcast world, right? Like, our agencies going to be asking you for more and more of this expertise? What about when you go direct to brand? Is this an opportunity for you to say, oh, you want to play like Discovery plays the game? Let me help you and guide you and show you how to do whatever it is, that magic thing that you do.
Yeah, I would say that's an upsell opportunity for brands and maybe corporate or commercial, because you're bringing entertainment experience from the network world, and you're saying, hey, they think of this across, somebody's watching their channel all the time for the next month. So how many times do you ping them about that new show coming up? How many times do you get into strategy, basically? And so you're bringing that expertise as an upsell. Whether you translate in the dollars is one thing, and I would say Tim and Joel say yes, please. But the other part of that is, are you translating into value in terms of a relationship? That, oh, these guys are thinking about our brand beyond just our brand and what it is, but where it lives and the platform and all of that. And so, yeah, you're totally emphasizing that when you take it to the commercial world, the ad world, because you're suggesting, like, hey, from a storytelling aspect, which is what everybody wants it to be, a story for your brand, you're finding different avenues to kind of ping in along the trail for them to, embrace that brand. And that squarely comes from having delivered so many different things. You get in that meeting and your creative director or your producer can say directly to the client, hey, for this other company, we did this thing for this show that we were promoting, and they had 3 different creatives. And I know it might be a little bit more, but like, it really brought in like this sector of the demographic, and it combined it with this sector of the demographic, and it was just another extra spot using the same footage. Yeah. And that's where all of a sudden you start to create that great value and relationship for the client.
It's interesting because I've been for years putting this theory out there that every brand is slowly waking up to a world called, hey, we need to be a content network. I mean, especially lifestyle brands and heavily consumer facing brands and so forth. And what I'm hearing you say is, yeah, there's totally an opportunity to help them, guide them, lead them, because you're saying, hey, this is how the content networks like the Discoveries and Nat Geos and all these people of the world have been doing it. Let's bring that same expertise over to you, because you want to be on everything from TikTok to Facebook to to Discovery Channel. So we can help you with that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even about us doing the work. It's teaching their internal team, like, yeah, you guys should be hiring us for this thing. Like, this is something you get a younger junior person to do and save you guys a ton of money, and then just lead the better, like the higher thinking stuff to us. And a lot of our clients seem to really appreciate that, because we don't want to be bogged down by making TikTok dance videos of whatever product you're selling. Like, we can give you all the footage and do that. Footy.
Speak for yourself, Dave.
You love those, am I? Sorry.
Come on.
Like these ones where you're like pointing at the screen. Yeah.
No, I love the fact that your idea of like you're even just leveraging the technical need into a strategy opportunity, right? Because it's really low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of opportunity. And what we're kind of saying is don't just be so dragged down by these deliverables. If you think through it like an entrepreneur of need plus resources equals solution, now you're onto something of, sure, it's on your doorstep, might not be the favorite thing that you have to adopt, but now that you've adopted it, like love it, move it on and do what you can to help it grow. Yeah, that's an evolution process here in our industry. So it's interesting to hear you guys talk about this. This is really something that I'd say it's corporate creep. It's happening more and more to people. It's a recognition the industry is changing, these new deliverables, but we don't have to just deal with it. We don't have to just accept it and be a victim to it. How do we kind of put on our thinking hat, our strategy hat, and move forward? So I love your input today. It's been really helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not going to change the way all of these networks are combining forces and methods and engineering, feats that they all have, and they're all so completely different, but all face the same challenge. So it's great to have a good breadth of knowledge, no matter where you are or who you work with. It's always helpful.
Well, I appreciate you guys being on here today. To both of you, Footy, Dave, Tim, glad you could join in as well. And I would just echo what Tim said. I appreciate the optimism, right? It's easy to begrudge this increasing complexity, but I feel like there's a different mindset that you guys are bringing to it that I'm like, oh, okay. It's not something to rant about. It's something to understand and develop a new solution. And maybe it's part of what moves your business forward. So thank you. But thank you guys for coming on and sharing your perspective. I love it.
Yeah. Thanks, Joel.
All right, Tim, wrap us up. We got to get people on. We only have half an hour. We're 1 minute over.
I'm going to wrap it up the easiest way possible. We exist so you can thrive in business, life, and career. Thanks for listening to us today and be part of this conversation. If you want to hear more and participate more, join our community conversation. I know Dave and Footy will be there, answer questions, and give them any feedback, criticism, love, whatever you want to do. Let's have an honest conversation about this. So thanks for joining us. Joel, thanks for pulling this together, and good to see you guys. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.